Welcome, everyone. Feel like I'm on a cruise ship here. Smells nice and fresh in here, too. So, hey, Dave. Oh, my gosh. Look, it's Dave from Cholesterol Code, everyone. Great talk, Dave.
Carole, by the way, is one of my favorite people. So
oh. Dave's one of my favorite people, too. One of my top 100 favorite people. I'm not going to tell you which number of the top 100. Oh, thank you guys for coming. I know you had a lot of choices, so I'm glad you're here with me. We have a very full schedule of breakout sessions, so people watching live on my Instagram here too. So my name is Carole Freeman. I'm going to talk to you about the keys to sustainability on keto, and I know we've had several people talking about this, including the Keto Gains guys too. So it's a very important topic, and I'm glad you're here to learn more about my approach to this. So I'm specifically going to be focusing on the psychology of appetite, cravings, and behavior change. These are really broad topics though, and so I'm going to tell you as much as I can in the time we have together, and hopefully give you enough information that you have some things to act on. So I'm going to share my keto story, and then I'm going to talk about the typical keto journey, which is you start out in the keto honeymoon phase, things are going great, and then things start to get hard and you struggle. And the majority of people that are doing keto right now, it seems like there's about 3 or 4 years in, this seems to be about the time where people really start to struggle with keeping the weight off. And I'm going to share with you what I've identified as the 3 pillars of sustainability. This mic is weird because it's hot on the P's, but it's not hot otherwise. So how about if I talk like this? Is that better? It sounds better.
That just turns the speaker.
And for those of you that want, I have a thank you gift at the end. And so even if you're bored the whole way through, hang out, because I'm going to share with you how I'm going to give you a code that gives you access to my 28-day fast and easy keto meal blueprint at the end, just as a thank you. So my disclosures, I have a company and I earn money from coaching, training, consulting, and affiliate products on my website. All right, my keto story. For as long as I can remember, well, probably at least going back to about 18 years of age, when I went on my first diet, I've always been trying to figure out what were the secrets to optimal body weight and mental health. And I spent a lot of time reading everything that I could on nutrition and psychology and brain chemistry and habit change, and I, like a lot of you here, have swung the pendulum from standard American diet, vegetarian, vegan, raw food. And then when I got really sick on that, went back to standard American garbage. And here I am at keto now. So how many of you have been on that, somewhere on that pendulum spectrum? A lot of people, okay. And in 2007, I began my pursuit of formal education. I was a late bloomer and finally was able to go to school and get my bachelor's in nutrition and a master's in nutrition and clinical health psychology from Vassar University in Seattle, Washington. And I thought that was all that I needed. However, when I started getting into my psychology classes, I asked one of my professors one day, so exactly how does this counseling stuff help people make change? And his reply was, that's a really good question. I was like, seriously? I'm going 6 figures in debt for that's a good question. We don't even know how it helps people make change. And so I also picked up a certification in clinical hypnotherapy because I wanted to figure out maybe that was the missing piece in helping people make change. Helping people moderate their eating and lose weight and keep it off. I'm a credentialed healthcare provider in Washington State. I'm a registered hypnotherapist and a certified nutritionist there. In my training, now Vassar, I'm not going to bash on Vassar because all the schools are teaching similar things in nutrition. And of all the nutrition schools you can go to, Bastyr taught top notch. Their focus is whole body, whole human approach. But being conscientious of helping people feel as positive as possible, they taught me things like health at every size model. Is anybody familiar with that? It says that we should, the research shows, which it does when we exclude low carb keto diets, that when people go on diets, they always gain the weight back and then some. And so this is a research-based approach that shows that if we just help people learn to love themselves as they are, and not diet, that will be better in the long run for their health and sustainability of weight than trying to encourage them to go on another diet. And we also learn things like mindful eating, which says that if you eat whatever you want without judgment, mindfully aware of every bite of that chocolate cake going in your mouth, that somehow this would magically make you eat less and be at a healthy weight. We also learned intuitive eating, which means that if you just tune into your body, just listen to your body, it will tell you exactly what you need to eat to be healthy. And so I embrace this. This is how I live my life. I spent 5 years getting 2 nutrition degrees. And every night I would walk through the grocery store, through the bakery section, tuning in to my body. What is it that I need tonight? The answer was always one of those delicious desserts that was in the case there. We also learned the 80-20 rule. That if 80% of the time you ate healthy whole foods, 20% of the time you could eat whatever you wanted, and it wouldn't matter. That was a perfect balance. You would be healthy. So it turns out that if you do the math, that means that Monday through Friday you eat a healthy, balanced diet of whole grains and so on. And then on the weekends you could eat whatever you wanted. How many of you lived that life before? How much weight did you gain that way? So it turns out the 80-20 rule, it works as well as it would if you were trying to follow that for marriage. So imagine that Monday through Friday you're faithful to your spouse. Friday night you're like, hey honey, going out with the girls tonight. Don't wait up. But don't worry, because I'll be back Sunday night. We'll just get right back to monogamy then. So 80-20 rule in dieting works about as well as it does in marriage. And so this was me after 5 years of studying nutrition, psychology, certification in clinical hypnotherapy. And this wasn't even the heaviest that I got. I was practicing as a nutritionist. And I was helping everyone learn to love themselves and let go of dieting. Something was missing. March of 2014, I was gifted this. I was rear-ended by a distracted driver, going about 35 miles an hour. I wasn't, she was. You can't tell, but I'm actually in the car in this photo. The impact broke my seat and I'm laying flat in the car. There was a double impact because the car hit me from behind, and then I smashed into that SUV in front of me as well. And I suffered an undiagnosed brain injury, crush injuries to my legs. The next year and a half, I just was progressively more and more disabled to the point of being bedridden. If anybody's heard of it, I was developing chronic regional pain syndrome in my legs. This is a progressive, disabling pain condition that causes such severe swelling that you can't even stand, let alone sit, without your feet elevated. And then the brain injury led to post-traumatic hypopituitarism. So pituitary is a big fancy long word, phrase. The pituitary controls all the other glands in the body. And so basically everything in my body was shutting down. I had a symptom list a mile long. And, I'm sorry, there's a video right there.
Oh,
I'm so involved in my story, I didn't even notice that Mike was freaking out. I'm like, what is Mike doing? Thank you, Mike.
Sorry.
Sorry, sir. Thank you so much for participating in that front. Thank you, sorry, I'm sorry. And thank you, Mike, for production value. I went to 172 different doctor's visits trying to figure this out. I finally figured out my own diagnosis, but even then I couldn't get properly treated. And thank goodness that I didn't get the proper treatment, because actually the first year here at Low Carb San Diego, I met a psychologist that did the assessments that I was trying to get for my brain injury. And he said it was really good that I never got that diagnosis or treatment, because they put you on about 4 different medications, and I would be disabled and probably about 350 pounds right now, had I been properly diagnosed. So I was desperate though. I'm not somebody who's just gonna live my life and lay in bed all day. So I racked my brain. I truly believe that if we feed ourselves properly, our body can heal itself. And so I remembered in grad school about this much information about a ketogenic diet for epilepsy. And I reasoned that, well, epilepsy is something that's not right in the brain. Perhaps this is something that I should look into. I initially found the work of Dr. Peter Attia, and at that time he was really gung-ho with the keto diet and writing very science-based articles. And I decided I would give it a try, but I was skeptical, because remember, I'd spent 5 years and $100,000 to get a degree to tell me that diets are too hard to follow. And so I knew I was going to have to throw everything at this that I had, because I was a terrible dieter. I was somebody who could stick with it for a meal or two, and then I'd be like, forget this. I want to go eat some more chocolate cake. And so I threw everything at it that I'd known, everything I studied about psychology, cravings, appetite, behavior change, and I set out my own protocol to follow. So I was desperate. And it was really cool, because just within days, the symptoms, the doctor still wanted to tell me I had fibromyalgia, or depression, or any other number of things, Lyme disease. Within days, those symptoms went away. And I was able to get out of bed. And within 6 months, I had lost 60 pounds and 10 inches off my waist. I didn't exercise. That's not, something that is, the good news is you can lose the weight without exercise, although it can have a lot of benefits. So this is just about a year apart. I think you can tell I'm on a right train. So I found the missing piece. It was a horrible car accident I went through, but I'm grateful that I did, because had I not gone through that, I would be one of those nutritionists right now saying keto is terrible, you guys are crazy, you're hurting people, and it's not sustainable. And so let's talk about how we make it sustainable then. So this is typically what happens, right? You discover keto, you get it figured out, start losing weight, feels effortless. Oh my God, the food is delicious. This is all the stuff that I thought was really bad for me. I'm not hungry. This is so much easier to follow this because I'm not starving all the time. The weight is melting off of me. Did I say that? Oh yeah. The mate is welting off of me. That's what I heard in my head. So, and I have tons of energy and all this mental clarity. But then, months in, maybe years in, the struggles start. How many of you have eaten carby foods when you feel low? So this is what I call the unenlightened excuses. So there's a lot of people out there that have tried keto and given up already. And these are the things that they say why they can't stick with it. Well, I'm just a food addict. Well, the cravings were too intense. Well, I got bored with the food. Just felt too deprived. Well, the holidays came. It was just too hard to resist. Well, I don't have any accountability support. My whole family's eating carbs. I can't stick with this. It's just too hard to figure out. The side effects are miserable. How many of you have thought at least one of these at one time? Yeah. So the real reason is I found that overcoming all of those things requires 3 different pillars. You need to have the right knowledge. A lot of people are following keto that isn't the right way, the healthy way. They're not getting electrolyte supplements corrected. They don't have the right support. Support comes in various forms, and I don't know, there's probably rare people out there that could do it all by themselves with no support, and everyone else they know is not doing it, but it's really challenging. And the third part is addressing the psychology of cravings, appetite, behavior change. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. Again, this is a lot to cover in an hour or so, but I'm going to focus in on this. And it all boils down to brain chemistry. Brain chemistry of cravings, appetite, and behavior change. And this is something, frankly, that's variable from person to person. So this is, there's great genetic influence on how challenging this is from person to person. So some people, they change to keto and they stick with it and it's easy. They don't look back. Other people have different brain chemistries that make former carby foods still very much call their name and make it challenging, but it's not hopeless. So let's talk about what are cravings. So it's a strong desire or urge with a very specific food. So we typically don't have a craving in general for, if we just want food in general, that's hunger. Craving is typically targeted at a very specific food or food type. And it mostly boils down to dopamine. Who's heard of dopamine? It's a brain chemical. And I like to think of it as a Scooby snack for your brain. So who remembers the Scooby-Doo show? And every time they wanted Scooby to do something, you'd be like, no, I don't want to do that. I'll give you a Scooby snack, Scoob. Yeah. And you'd be like, all right, I'll do it. So this is the way your brain is. Your brain learns by getting dopamine rewards. So anytime you do something that promotes your survival as a human being, your brain releases dopamine. And it's a learning chemical. So a lot of people think of it as the reward chemical in the brain. It is also the learning chemical. It's what your brain releases to teach you, do that again. And it's a conditioned response. So who remembers the studies of Pavlov where they fed the dog and they rang the bell, and every time they fed the dog, they rang the bell. And so doing that enough times, they found that just ringing the bell, the dog would start to salivate. And this is exactly what happens in our brain. And each of us have different thresholds for this. So if we've done something enough times in the past, then that's where the cravings come from. And your brain remembers everything. Okay, so not just that food that you ate 100 times going through the drive-thru, but it remembers the feelings you had before you did that, the time of the day, the smells, so sensory input, so the smells, the sights, the emotions you felt, and the time and place. And what happens is that you encounter any of those things, okay, so you get the bell dinging, that turns on the craving. So any of these things that are conditioned to go along with that food that you ate in the past, dopamine starts getting released even before you consume that thing now. Because your brain says, you did this in the past, and it was really good, you should do it again, Scooby. And so this is where a lot of people really struggle, is that say every night after work, they came home and they relaxed by having a glass of wine, or they had some chips and salsa while they were cooking dinner. Or after dinner, they always had cookies or ice cream. And if you've done that enough times, it's really intense. And this is a part of the brain that logic and reason is hard to overcome. These are biological drives, it's subconscious, and really, really strong. All right, let's talk about raccoons. About 15 or so years ago, I bought my first condo by myself. And the first night I walk out onto the balcony. It was a small little complex, and there was this greenway in between. It was night, and I was so proud of myself. And all of a sudden, I see this pack of beady eyes running across the greenway. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I got myself into? I've got a 30-year mortgage here. I'm stuck. And then I see my downstairs neighbor putting out a cookie sheet tray full of cat food. And there was an entire pack of raccoons. They were running to that tray. And I yelled down to her, I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you feeding them? And she says, well, when we first moved in, there was one outside and it looked so hungry. I just put a little food out for it. But the next day, it came back with a couple friends. And the next day it brought some more. And now every day, at whatever time that was, 7 p.m., the entire pack comes. And she said, I tried not feeding them, but they ripped down my screen door and started scratching my sliding door. So now I have to feed them every day or they tear up my house. So what is this? This is a true story, but what does it remind you of? This is the Scooby snack effect. This is the cravings. So a lot of people, if you struggle with cravings for sweet, a lot of people take the route that, well, I'm just going to replace my former carby foods with some keto-friendly desserts, sweets, and all of that. But what is that doing? It's actually just reinforcing. I call it feeding the raccoons. So all of you, when you have a craving, a lot of people mistakenly think that, well, I just need something sweet, and that got rid of the craving. But actually, you're giving yourself a Scooby snack every time you give yourself something sweet when you crave. That's a reward. That's reinforcing the craving. So, the only way to get rid of the cravings is to stop feeding the raccoons. Take a break. And yes, they're going to tear up your screen door for a little while, but they will go away eventually. So it's hard. That's why it feels really hard for people to let go of that, because the cravings are really intense for a little while, but they get better and go away. So here are my suggested strategies to curbing cravings. This is what I have my clients start with. So be mindful of sensory input to those former foods that you struggle with cravings for. So see, smell, and hear. Your brain does not know the difference between what you vividly imagine and what's actually happening. And for those of you that would like to participate, I'll give you a little experiment here live that will help you understand how powerful imagining something really is. So those of you that are willing to participate, if you want, you can close your eyes, you can keep your eyes open, either way. But just imagine a lemon. That yellow, bumpy skin, waxy. Now you've got a knife and you're cutting into that lemon. A little bit of it squirts in your face. You cut out a nice big wedge of that lemon. Put it in your mouth and just bite down. You feel your mouth pucker and all that juice. All right, that's it. So just open your eyes and come back, wide awake and alert. How many of you noticed your mouth watered? Yeah. So that illustrates, but right now if I just said, make your mouth water, you can't consciously do it, but vividly imagining something makes your body react as if it's actually happening. So this is something else to be mindful of, is stop fantasizing about carby foods. Stop looking at photos of them. Stop spending all day on Pinterest and looking up keto recipes. Because just imagining those foods, so a lot of people, they also want to like, well, I just go smell the cupcakes. But you're actually, you're stoking the fire. You're increasing cravings, actually. So I recommend avoiding seeing, smelling, or even hearing. So what's the one carby thing that we are conditioned when we hear it? Can anybody think of what I'm... Popcorn, yeah. Or, yeah, I mean, chips too, that crunch, right? That's why they do an advertisement. They know that if you hear that sound, that's going to make you want it. So for me in the beginning, and again, I had that diet skepticism. What I did, I avoided walking through the bakery in the grocery store. I stopped watching cooking shows. I stopped looking up recipes. Now, what I didn't tell you is that also at Bastyr, I picked up pretty much another degree in culinary arts. And I used to teach cooking classes and design culinary curriculum. And I no longer cared about food after I started keto. I used to spend hours and days planning dinner parties and events because I just was focused on food. Anytime I would travel someplace, I would spend weeks beforehand planning out every place I would go eat. And that was the whole focus. There was never enough time in a day to go eat everywhere I wanted to eat. But now, when I go someplace, it's the last thing I think about. I don't care about cooking anymore. I mean, I like to cook, but I don't want to spend all day doing it. So be mindful of your trips to the grocery store. I've had some clients so far as go to ordering their food, their groceries delivered so that they can avoid those exposure at the grocery store. Watching TV shows, the cooking shows, I still to this day don't like watching them because as soon as I start watching it, like makes me crave and hungry, and I'm like, I don't want that. The work environment is really tricky for a lot of people. For whatever reason, work is, the way we get through work is, it's bagel day, it's cupcake day, every other day it's somebody's birthday, and, you gotta have this food or that food. I recommend, if you're really struggling with a lot of cravings and keeping your appetite down, to actually cut out recipes. So keep things super simple. A protein, maybe some veg, add some fat optionally to that, salad dressing or butter if you want or need. But keep it really simple. The reasons for this is, one, you're not spending all day looking at recipes. Two, you're not spending 40 minutes or an hour preparing dinner where you're actually just thinking about how good it's going to taste. And also, recipes, the more complex the flavors are, that contributes to us overeating as well. And also, be mindful of past places of use. Okay, so if every day after work you drove home and you went through the drive-through, I suggest finding a new route home, even if it's longer, because that's going to avoid the cue that was the first part of that craving for you. What are some other examples you can think of, like always places that you always used in the past? Can anybody think of camping? Oh yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, my family was like, this was the one time we had junk food all year, was just camping. Any other ideas? Parties, holidays. So we just skipped the holidays this year. Travel, yeah. For me, it was like my dad conditioned me. My dad is a sugar addict. He conditioned me that we went on a road trip. He stopped and got a bag of candy before he went. And it took me a long time to unravel that. Travel in general, too. Like, well, I'm at this place, and we always eat this thing when we go there. I'm also really mindful when I talk about things. I've said some carby things, specific things, but I'm also really mindful with my clients about not mentioning certain things. Because, for example, if I say, blah, 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 carby thing, that might have been somebody's favorite food in the past. And then they start thinking about it, ruminating about it, and then all of a sudden they're like, I can't stop thinking about it. I also recommend, to break that feeding the raccoons pattern, is to stop sweets at least 30 days, maybe 60 days, all sweets, even keto-friendly ones. So this means eliminating desserts and fat bombs. I mean, these things can have a place long-term, occasionally, maybe. But if you struggle, desserts and fat bombs are always extra calories. They're never nutrient-dense whole foods. They're just extra calories that taste good. Also, getting adequate protein is really going to help cut back on cravings too. Here are some math equations for those of you that like that stuff. If you're just like something a little easier, for most people between 60 and 100 grams a day fits that math equation up there. Salt. How many of you know that you need to add salt, lots of salt on a keto diet? Excellent. That's a really big missed piece for a lot of people. Symptoms of inadequate salt intake: muscle cramps, constipation, headaches, lightheaded dizziness, fatigue, and also cravings. So if you're having any of these or a combination of them, you probably need more salt. Willick and Finney have recommended that people get between 2 to 6 grams of sodium per day on a ketogenic diet. Anytime you're eating 60 grams of carbs or less per day, this is the recommendation. And that's a minimum. Some people need even more than that. The Salt Fix, I'll do a plug for that book by James D. Nicolantonio, has some very specific recommendations in there for people that are exercising and or working or living in hot climates as well. You need lots more as well. So this equates to 1 to 3 added teaspoons per day. And again, some people need more than this. I love the Redmond Real Salt. They just happen to be here as well. Go talk to them and go try their salt. I'm not an affiliate, by the way, either, so. Appetite. Stealing from Rob Wolf, we are wired to eat. Historically, food was really hard to get. This is part of why our brain remembers everything around us eating something. Okay, so those berries in September that you had to walk a few miles to get to, they were rare. And so your brain remembers the trail to get there, the trees that were around those, the taste of those. But today we live in a world where there's sugars and carbs everywhere. We don't need to remember all those places that they are. And things that trigger eating or overeating, those sensory cues again. So how many of you, like, I'm not hungry at all, and then all of a sudden somebody mentions something, anything, even if it's a steak, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm actually hungry now. Or smelling. You know, there's a reason they put the Cinnabon places usually by entrance at malls. Liquid calories. Oh, we get the reverb now. Liquid calories. It's like I'm in a canyon there. Liquid calories, they bypass almost all satiety cues. So any liquid calories you're consuming are pretty much guaranteed to be extra calories. So, you know, that high-fat coffee that you like, the bulletproof coffee. Oh, I shouldn't mention brand names, but those are always going to make us eat more than we did if we're not having liquid calories. Also, highly palatable foods. This is a combination of anything sweet and fat together. We will eat lots more of it in that combination than we will if either of those are separate. So this is all historic, standard American dessert foods and snack foods, high in carbs and high in fat. But it doesn't even have to be real sugar. This can actually just be that sweet taste plus fat. So how many have had delicious keto desserts and then they called your name? As long as they were in the house, they called your name until they were gone. Also, some other things that contribute to overeating or just eating more in general, the buffet effect. So the more variety of food in front of you, the more you will eat. So just imagine that there's a pile of steak in front of you. How much of that could you eat? Add, you know, we could do carb examples or even keto examples, right? So add some berries to that, add some broccoli, add some butter to that. Let's make a broccoli casserole that's got cheese and cream and bacon in it. How much more of that could you eat? So the more flavor variety, the more types of foods on your plate, the more you will eat. The dessert effect. You maybe have just had the most filling meal, you're so satisfied and stuffed, you've had a steak and broccoli, and then somebody says, oh, by the way, I've got this keto cheesecake I've got. Oh, I've got a little room for that. So this is also about the variety. So we get specific satiety. So if you're just eating one food, you will get tired of it and full and satisfied sooner than you would if you've got several foods. So you might feel full and satisfied from the steak and broccoli you've had, but now you've got variety, this dessert, or maybe somebody even brings out berries and whipped cream, and all of a sudden you've got room for that now. And the Thanksgiving effect, that's also the buffet effect, just, you know, the big variety of all those different foods. Who's seen a slide like this showing how food has changed over time? So the foods, we recognize the ones on the bottom there, but the tops are how those foods used to be. Like, is it going forward or is it just talking too loud? So we've selectively bred all of these foods and so many more of them. And have we selectively bred them to be higher in vitamins and minerals or higher in sugar? So this is the problem when people are still thinking that fruits and vegetables are super healthy. We need lots of them. Well, they used to exist like the top ones. Those don't look very appetizing, were they? These were things that we hunted for as a last resort. Well, the deer are lean this year and we didn't get very many of them, so we're going to dig up some of these roots and try and eat a few of those and boil a lot of them. But we've selectively bred them now to be big and very tasty and full of sugar. And I had this realization in January this year. I met Dr. Joan Ifland, who, if you haven't talked to her or heard her talk, she specializes in processed food addiction. She has a PhD in that. And she talked about with processed foods, the work that she does, she draws a line in the sand between real whole foods, processed foods. And the analogy goes that for an alcoholic, we know that they should drink non-alcoholic drinks and they should avoid alcoholic drinks. But the problem with food is, where do we draw that line? Where is that line? And my awareness, my realization of this is that keto actually helps us draw this line. And perhaps that's part of why it's so helpful to us, is it draws a line in the sand between processed foods, highly refined and sugary carby foods, and also those foods that have been highly selectively bred to be really high in sugar. So the root vegetables, the fruits, and other things like that. So following a ketogenic diet mimics eating foods that were the healthiest for us, that we've been eating for the longest period of time. But keto is just catchy, easier to say. So here's some strategies to minimize appetite. Some of these are going to be similar to what the cravings were, right? So avoid seafood. This is where I suggest to limit or avoid recipes. Or if you tend to overeat, keep your meals really, really simple. Put foods away. If you see foods, you're going to want to eat them. So this means, you know, putting them away in the refrigerator, the freezer, putting them out in the garage, putting them in opaque containers in the refrigerator as well. Avoid those TV shows and grocery stores. And the work environment, you know, some strategies people use is just bypass the break room, ask people to put the candy dish away, maybe planning some other non-carby events for your workplace instead of all the sugar and stuff. I also recommend that people avoid, if you tend towards overeating and you struggle with cravings and overeating, put away the nuts and seeds. That tends to be a universal one that it's really, really easy to overeat for people. And especially the pureed ones, otherwise known as nut butters. So if you can portion out an ounce of nuts and eat that and be satisfied and not have them calling your name, that's a good indicator that you probably can do fine with nuts and seeds. But how many of you can do that and not think about them the rest of the day? It's pretty hard. Also eating fat. So this is, I stole this, is this a haiku? For Michael Pollan's Eat Food. Eat fat, the right kind, but not too much. Fat actually stimulates bile, and that can actually stimulate appetite regulating hormones. Saturated fat is the one that's preferred, that's going to be able to provide that, which, good news, that's the kind that appears in the foods we're eating anyways. And I recommend no liquid fats except olive oil. That one has a long history of use, 5,000 years now. Avocado oil, I've mixed, I haven't made my decision about whether I think that's a good oil or not. It's new, it's brand new on the market. I don't even know how to make it. Can you squeeze an avocado and get oil to come out? I know it's promoted as a really healthy oil, but I don't know. I use it, but It's not my preferred fat. So here's the source for that fat-stimulating, appetite-regulating hormones, and I think Doug is going to make the slides available to you guys too. So again, avoid liquid calories. A lot of people mistakenly think that drinking a high-fat coffee in the morning keeps them full and satisfied all day long, but it's really just burning your own body fat that's keeping that satiety. It's not that 400 or 600 calorie coffee that you're drinking. And this is a big one. I talk to people all the time. They're like, I don't understand why I'm not losing weight. I'm drinking my bulletproof coffee every morning, getting my fats up. But 400 to 600 calories. How many eggs is 400 calories worth of eggs? Is that like 6 eggs? Yeah, 5 or 6 eggs. Could you wake up in the morning and eat 5 or 6 eggs?
Oh, yeah.
But you could drink 400 or 600 calories worth of liquid coffee with some fat in it, no problem. And again, keep meals simple. This is what I mentioned too. So just keep it as simple as possible. These are some repeats of what I recommend for. Also, get away from snacking. Snacking is always extra food and calories. It's almost always craving driven. Habit change. This could be a whole talk by itself. This is a fun book too by Charles Duhigg, and he looks at habits as a 3-step process. So there's a cue or trigger. So that's what we were talking about, a time of day, a place, a feeling, and then the routine that you go through, and then the reward, which is going to be that dopamine in the brain. And the reason that our brain creates habits is that it wants to put patterns of habits on autopilot so that we don't have to consciously think about it, so that we can use our brain for more emergent things. So for example, driving a car. You don't even have to think about it. How many have been driving down the road and after 5 minutes you're like, oh man, I don't even remember driving the last 5 miles. So it's because it's a habit, it's an autopilot. Your brain has memorized everything you need to do so you don't have to consciously think about it. So this is the reason why we have habits. So habits are good, well, except for the ones that contribute to poor health. So there's a lot of different ways of habit change. Another person recently that I'm nerding out on is Gretchen Rubin. Does anybody listen to her stuff? She's got a book, Better Than Before, and then her 4 Tendencies book is coming out. Is it already out or coming out later this year? Is it out? Really cool. Lots of stuff in that one. So grab that book, and then I've got another book here as well that I recommend if this is something you struggle with. So stock your fridge and pantry and freezer with the foods you want to eat and not the ones that you don't want to eat. Make it really easy. Personally, I love to get pre-sliced meats and cheese from Costco or Trader Joe's and hard-boiled eggs, already hard-boiled. Just that's how easy and simple I like to keep it. Because we're going to do what's easy, and we're not going to do what's actually hard or inconvenient. So this might also mean that you do meal prep on the weekends if that works for you as well. You don't have to think about it. I know Mike Burr here is really great at doing his whole lunches for the entire week. You don't have to think about it. I recommend too then going with meals that are fast and easy, because this is actually how most people live their lives, pre-keto or just out in the world. They eat what is fast and easy. If it takes 40 to 60 minutes to prepare anything, it might be cool for a week or two, but it always falls by the wayside. So figure out how to make it easy. Here's another habit book that's really, really interesting if those of you are interested in that. So Atomic Habits by James Clear. Here's another technique if you're trying to develop a new habit. This is something that I work with my clients on for getting in the habit of getting salt. So pair it with something else that you do every day. So it's easy to add a new habit onto an existing habit. So for example, when you get up in the morning and you make your coffee. So put the salt right next to your coffee. Put another thing of salt by your toothbrush. And then you're going to make sure you're getting it twice a day that way. And get very, very specific. So as soon as I push the button on my Keurig to warm it up, I'm going to put the salt in the cup, and that's what I'm going to drink it every day. And then you can add a non-food reward to the end. So this is something that gives you endorphins. So this could be What are some non-food rewards that you can do? Favorite music, favorite scent, essential oils, photos, animals, pets, massage. If you've got a masseuse in your kitchen, that's great. Now the second and third pillar to support knowledge, I'm just going to briefly go over these. So support, you need to find accountability, motivation. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this. So tracking, whatever you track improves. So this is food and sleep and exercise. Whatever you track, you do better at it than if you don't. So find a partner, accountability partner, or a tribe, even better. So how many of you just being here this weekend just feel like your family here? You feel more reinvigorated. Is that redundant? More reinvigorated? Being part of a tribe is really important. Facebook groups, finding a coach as well is really great. Some people do really well. So Gretchen Rubin talks about the 4 different tendencies, and some people that are obligers. They're people that, if somebody tells them to do something, they do it out of obligation to that other person. Those people work really well with a coach. The coach told me to, so I'm just going to go do it. So don't feel bad if you're somebody who needs that accountability. Just embrace it. You know, our top elite athletes, you know, they get a coach. They don't think like, oh, I can do this NBA stuff all my own. I don't need a coach. Put your intentions out public. Tell people that you're following a keto diet, and then you're more likely to stick with it, because if they see you eating non-keto foods, they're gonna be like, hey, what's up? Tap into your why. A lot of people go into keto just focusing on the scale number, and that's all they're concerned with, is losing weight and hitting a certain number. But that's a finite goal, and it's not very motivating, because there are going to be weeks and months that the scale doesn't move, or it moves the direction you don't want it to. And so you need to look at the big picture. With my clients, I call this tapping into your why with capital letters. Why do you really want to do this? The weight really isn't the reason you want to do it. You want energy, you want to feel comfortable in your clothes, maybe you want to be able to sit in an airplane without an extender, maybe you want to walk up and down stairs without feeling winded, maybe you want to live a long, healthy life, maybe you want to be a good role model for your kids. So track those things frequently, at least once a week, but I recommend reflecting on them daily. For me in the beginning, I kept a daily blog, or not a blog, a daily Word document. I did daily journaling. And then once a month I did a public blog. And I hate the fact that I had a hard drive crash and I lost an entire year's journaling of my keto journey. I remember writing it thinking, this is going to make a great book someday. Now it's gone, so now I put everything on the cloud. But that really helps keep you motivated. So not only keeping track of how you feel now, but compare that to where you came from. I had a client I worked with early on before I realized how important this was, that she'd had fibromyalgia pain for 5 years, could not work out, and really was nearly disabling her life. And so she started out on a ketogenic diet, and within 1 month, she reported that she no longer had any pain, she was able to work out and exercise, and she lost 9 pounds in a month. And I was so excited for her. And anyone who has suffered with chronic pain, like just being free of that is so amazing. And then a couple months went by and I checked back in with her because I thought, oh my gosh, I can't wait to hear how she's doing now. And she reported that, well, you know, I just gave up on it because, you know, I missed fruit and I didn't really notice any improvements that were that dramatic. And I was like, are you kidding me? You're pain-free for the first time in 5 years. And so I found her original message to me and I sent it back to her and I said, this is what you told me. She says, I forgot. I forgot that I was pain-free. And so that was a light bulb moment for me to help people compare and contrast. Because you're going to forget how terrible you felt before. So find a way to stay in touch with that and remind yourself every day of what you're leaving behind. Knowledge, okay, so you need help. You need to get the information from the right sources. It turns out that keto is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Most people need a little tweaking in the beginning and often tweaking along the way. Here's some tips about how do you know who to trust. This is a tricky thing because we don't really have any solid, specific, universal training. You know, we're not getting this training in school. So even though I've got multiple degrees, I didn't learn about how to do a low-carb or ketogenic diet at all, barely. So here's some things I've come up with. There may be some other things that help guide you to figure out who to trust, because there's a lot of information out there that's frankly really wrong. And so look for people that have achieved the results that you're looking for, and also that they've successfully worked with a lot of people just like you. And they're also continuing to learn about keto, nutrition, health, wellness. This is not a static science. Nutrition, we're learning new stuff about it I don't know about every day, but yes, there's a lot to learn. And anybody who follows the work of Dave Feldman is just one example of how what we thought we knew 5 years ago is being turned on its head. So make sure you're following stuff with people that are continuing to learn. All right, here is your thank you gift. You guys have made it to the end. Congratulations. And I don't know what time it is. I think it's not quite an hour, but we'll stick around. We have this room for the next speaker doesn't start for a while, so I'll stick around for questions too. So text it for a code. So that's LCUSA 2019. People on Instagram are getting a bonus too. So that stands for Low Carb USA 2019. Text that to that number, and then you'll get a reply, and then it says to send your email address. And here's the, I'm leaving this open for 2 weeks. So those of you that are watching this video sometime in the future, I'm sorry you missed it. And here's what it looks like to be visual. So there's the phone number to text to, text that code, and reply with your email. Then you're going to get another response that says thank you, and then there's the link. So when you're going to get the code, you'll just follow the text you get. It tells you what to do.
Could you just, I can't see that.
Is it this one better to see? Okay. Yeah, take a picture and then do it later too.
Oh, yeah, right on, yeah.
And if you see me around this weekend too, you come and ask me, and I'll see if I can remember the numbers. Has everyone got it that wants it?
Is that for the book?
This is a digital. Yeah, I didn't even mention what it was. It's an online. It's a 28-day meal plan. It's a digital. It's an online thing. You can access PDFs of meal plans, shopping lists. So for a full month of fast and easy keto meals. And also there's a template that I include with that as well that just shows you the formula that I use when I create meal plans that are really simple and easy. So each meal itself is modular that way, so that you're not. How many have struggled with like leftover macros at the end of the day, and I've got 5 grams of carbs, 40 grams of protein, and 2 grams of fat left. What is that? So my blueprint actually teaches you how you actually just divide up your macros evenly for each meal, and so you never have that problem of leftover stuff at the end that you're like, oh my gosh, I guess I have to eat a stick of butter for dinner. All right, so you can find me, Keto Carole, on all the things, social media. There's my website if you want to see some more before and after photos. I also have a YouTube series, Keto Chat, as well, and on my website you can find that on the blog tab too. Lots of interviews. There are a few people in this room that I've interviewed on there, so really inspiring success stories too. So thank you all for being here. I'll stick around for questions too. So. Oh, yeah.
Do you have any particular...
Let's do the microphone, and then we can actually get it on.
Oh, well, I can talk loud. My info will get on video. Do you have any particular for tracking? I use MyFitnessPal, and I know there's another one that has a booth here. Do you have any ones that you particularly recommend, or? Yeah, MyFitnessPal is really popular. It works for a lot of people. I do use Chronometer. They just happen to be here as well.
I use Chronometer. They have a professional version of that. That's what I use with my clients. There's a couple of reasons I really like that. One is that it's extremely accurate. They actually pay money and subscribe to databases, nutrient databases. So you'll get accuracy down to 1/100th of a gram of proteins, fats, and carbs in all the foods you enter in there. So whereas things like MyFitnessPal and most of the other apps that are out there are just based off of nutrition labels, and nutrition labels actually aren't very accurate. They get to round up or down to their convenience. So this is why things like heavy whipping cream look like they have no carbs, but they really do. So Chronometer is extremely accurate. It also tracks vitamins and minerals, and most of the other apps don't track that. So you can actually keep an eye on how nutrient dense your meal plans and your eating is as well. They have a lot of functionality in there. It syncs up with your Fitbit and other scales and things, and you can add custom things you're measuring in there as well. So I'm a big fan of Chronometer. You got the microphone.
Oh, yeah. Well, the other one you said earlier, now I've only been on it for about 8 months, but you said like people sort of fall off after 3 or 4 years, and it seemed like many of the things you were talking about in your are things that often occur fairly quickly, you know, or the first couple of months or something like that. And so I'm wondering what happens after 3 or 4 years that's different that would cause people to fall off.
Yeah, so I was just commenting that I'm seeing a wave of people that have been really successful on keto at about 3 or 4 years having some struggles, like people coming out publicly on their social media accounts that they're struggling. But definitely people struggle all along the way. There may be people, and especially if they're not following a lot of these tips that I gave you, they may struggle from the first few weeks. And it is very individual, and some people have no struggles. It's very easy for them to make those changes, and then everyone else is on this continuum of how hard those things are for us. And it really depends on your genetic brain chemistry, of how susceptible you've been to this conditioning, the Scooby Snack effect, and also how frequently you've used these things in the past.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to pass on? Oh, thank you, moderator. What's your name?
I'm Dan.
Dan. Thank you, Dan.
I'm Sheldon. I'm a local neuroclinical psychologist on the staff at the hospital. Found out about keto with my patients. I'm very curious about how you got into what you got into. I'm sorry about what you went through. And one of my main things I do at the hospital is I work in a neuro rehab center. I see a lot of neurologically ill patients, so I'm really like to talk to you more about that. So a couple of things. Is there research on keto and neurological illness?
Is there?
Is there any literature?
Oh yeah, lots of.
I see a whole bunch on it right now.
There is a lot. So I know that the Charlie Foundation is a good resource for that. A lot of different neurological conditions.
Epilepsy.
Well, epilepsy, but also a lot of other
Yeah.
neurological conditions. What else am I forgetting? There's
Amy Burgers for
Amy Burgers. Oh yeah, for Alzheimer's. Georgia Eade. Is it Georgia Eade or Eads? Edie. Georgia Eade. Edie, I think is how it's pronounced.
Also, I've been experimenting around